So, I mean, it's been exactly a year since you premiered your first feature, Gin, at South by.
Yes.
And this is probably a big question, but I'll help us hone it in. But is there a way to sum up that experience from premiere till today?
Oh, wow. I guess I would sum it up by saying whirlwind. I would definitely say that week that we premiered our film was a whirlwind, but I also feel like the year since then has been a whirlwind as well.
And for those who don't know the film, tell me just the quick 1-2-liner of what's the film about.
Yeah, so Jen it's a coming of age story, and it's about a teenage girl whose life changes when her mother converts to Islam. Cool.
And then your film was picked up by Orion and came out. When did it come out?
It came out in November.
Right.
Yes.
And so what, you've written on the site about that process, so we don't need to go into that. If someone hasn't read those articles, they can go back and read your amazing pieces. But I think there's this idea that you go to a festival, you premiere your film, a distributor buys it, goes out in the world, and things are amazing. And you didn't quite have that experience. And so just talk a little bit about what that was like. You don't have to kind of get into all of it again, but more so the work you've been doing since the release of really supplementing what your distributor did or didn't do to reach the audiences you wanted to reach.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting because I still keep getting emails. I feel like, so the film came out in November. Between November and now, we've gotten more requests for this film than we got before the film was released. Like people wanting to screen the film, people wanting the film to play at their festival, their community group, their school, whatever. And I think it's interesting because a lot of times when I reach out to these people, they don't even know that our film was distributed, that it was released. And I had to, so one festival, for example, I was like, oh, by the way, we have a distributor. And they're like, oh, I didn't even know it was distributed, but can we still see a screener? And I'm like, okay, I send it, and they're like, oh, but we can't screen any films that are streaming. Because I'm like, you realize that this film, it's on iTunes and it's on Amazon. This film is available to the public. So it's interesting. It's like a lot of people don't even know that the film has already been released, and I think that kind of speaks to that whole experience of, just as an independent film, getting kind of lost in this world of distribution and of distributors who may not totally understand, your audience and also what you're trying to do with the film. But I feel like it's interesting because I think that's always been kind of our goal, was to have the film be a piece, to be a kind of like a conversation piece for, Muslim communities, for Black communities, for women, like just be something that can be a talk piece, and it's almost like I feel like that's happening more now because the people that are reaching out to us for that are exactly those type of people. They're like I said, they're like community groups, and they're very specialized kind of niche groups who really want the film and who want to screen it and have conversations about it.
On the next one, how do you ensure that you can reach those audiences?
Well, I mean, I definitely, next time I'll ask a lot more questions. And from what I gather, people don't want to answer those questions. Even if I ask those questions, I can't even guarantee that they're going to answer those questions. Even talking about a distributor, like I can't guarantee that they're going to answer those questions that I ask. But it's like when a distributor says, we're going to distribute your film to 10 cities, like it's gonna play in 10 theaters or 10 cities. You think, oh, this is great, and they say, and it says New York and LA. Or it says New York and or LA. It's like, can it be New York and LA? Can we strike this or? Yeah. Because it's like, yeah, and actually, in retrospect, when I think about it, we actually did ask what cities it was going to play in, and we were really concerned about, just to get specific but not specific. Like we really wanted to play in Oakland because, the director is from Oakland, and we knew that there would be a big turnout and a big following there. So we did ask for that city early on, but then also just kind of going through the process and learning how many Black Muslims there are in Philadelphia. Like we did a screening in Black Star at Black Star Film Festival that was completely sold out. I mean, they'd be like pulling out chairs, and there were so many people there that wanted to see this film. We won 2 awards, like an audience award and best film at that festival. And so, just kind of realizing kind of the need and the want of that community to see this film. But Philly wasn't even on the list of cities that the film played in. And as much as we tried to kind of rally and say, hey, and even to say, hey, we know of this theater that's in Philly. Can you connect with them? Can we make this happen? It just didn't happen. And I think for me, one of the learning experiences was, like I said, asking more questions kind of in negotiation stage, but then also even afterwards, it's like you go into this situation assuming and thinking that, oh, they know what they're doing. And like, they're doing their best. They're trying. And then you start realizing that that's not necessarily, I'll say that's not necessarily the case, depending on, who the distributor is. Like, that's not necessarily the case. And that you have to, it's like I in retrospect, I wish that, because I'm from New Jersey, and I had a bunch of people in New Jersey who wanted to see this film. And I wish that I had have been like, this is the theater that you need to go to in New Jersey. And like, you know what I mean? Like, I wish I'd have done it myself rather than, just assuming that they were going to put it in the right places where the film should have been.
What kind of stories do you want to be telling as a producer?
So I want to be telling stories that speak to the nuance of marginalized people. And what I mean by that is like, so for example, right now, there's some people that say this is a good time for Black stories, right? And so we have, you have your Issa Rae's, you have your Ava DuVernay, like all these people are telling stories and they're telling great stories. But I'm also like, there are, as a Black woman, there are tons of stories that center that perspective that I don't even think we've scratched the surface of what those stories could be. So I tend to gravitate toward those type of stories that center women, that center people of color, and kind of show those nuanced stories that we kind of let fall by the wayside or gloss over or what have you, is kind of like is what my passion is.
As a producer, how are you, and I don't have the answer for myself, how do you convince people, financiers in particular, and also distributors, right, that there is an audience? You clearly saw and knew you had an audience for Gin, and that also was low budget and not easy to raise money for, and so you did it, but then it also then missed the mark as in distribution because you had to trust in somebody else knowing it. Mm-hmm. What are the things that you kind of can take into your next film to find some more footing in these stories that you can't point to an example for?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's no there's no real comp. Like even with Gin, like what's a comp for Gin? There isn't one. There's some movies that you can point to, like you can say, Muslim is probably maybe the closest film that was like Gin, but there's no, I can't point to a story about a Muslim girl, Black Muslim girl, that becomes very, very specific. And, in our case with Gin, in terms of financing, I think we were fortunate to find people. We found an organization that happened to align with those goals. We found people who were just kind of, I think the timing of our film kind of struggled with people who were looking to, say something in the world, and they didn't really know what that was or what that meant, and figured they'd take a chance on Gin. So I sense that moving forward, if I'm going to continue to tell these kinds of stories, I'm going to have to find people who are okay with, being trailblazers as well, even in that sense, and who want to tell different kind of stories, which I've also thought about, that I may need to move into a different space, or like seek a different type of investor.
Now you're going into your second feature. I guess, you may have already answered it, but what do you wish you would have known going into Gin that you now can then propel? I mean, maybe this is what it would be that you can take into putting your next film together. And I think not enough people talk about the second feature, right? Because it's just so hard to get the first one made. But sometimes the second's even harder because you're not as naive. And so how do you feel? I mean, it's been a year. And so what do you think that next film is going to look like for you?
I have a couple of features that I'm trying to get up off the ground now that feel like, this feels like the train, like, trying to pull the train up the hill, or pull the car up the hill. And I think in many regards, I kind of had this idea, this same sentiment when I went into it with Gin. Especially when you're low budget and it's like you only have a certain amount of resources. Let's just get the film in the can. Like, let's just finish the movie. And sometimes, it's a matter of survival. That's really all you can do. But I really think it's important for me now to really think through, like, from beginning to end, what is, like, even like, what do we want this release to look like? And I'm kind of getting to the point where I get excited when I meet with filmmakers who have a different plan, who are like, I've been thinking, this film actually might open well at such and such like a totally different film festival. Or, this one filmmaker was like, actually, I think that this film could do well international, like at an international film festival. Okay, let's explore that. Let's think about, like, what does that look like, and what does that mean? Like, to me at this point, that's more exciting than, we'll just see what happens. We're gonna submit it to some festivals and submit it to Sundance, and then whatever else from there. Because it's just not a great plan.
I agree with you, and I think it's about filmmakers thinking about their audience,
and
who is their audience,
totally.
And then catering your festival premiere to that, and it all connects. And yes, you want that industry validation, and Sundance helps your sales in a different way. But as you've said, even premiering at South by, it didn't necessarily make your distribution process any better.
We applied to Sundance. I was always kind of like, not putting all my eggs in that basket of Sundance. And we actually had a plan A, plan B, plan C. Like, we were like, okay, if Sundance doesn't happen, we're looking at South by. You know what I mean? So South by was in the mix of our, like, kind of like our goals of, like, where we wanted to be. So I feel like we accomplished that. And like I said, in retrospect, I feel like it really was the best place for our film to premiere was at South by. But even with that, like, trying to say that to some filmmakers, like, as a producer, sometimes I feel like people think I'm being negative, or like I'm being, or like I don't believe in the film because I don't believe it can get into Sundance. And it's like, it's not that. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with like how good your film is, how bad your film is. It has nothing to do with that. It's like, who's going to watch this movie? Who is this movie for? And are they coming to ski in Park Slope?
Right.
There's a good chance that they may not be there. Like, that may not be the best, like, way to premiere this movie.
What do you think is the most important quality a producer needs to have?
For me, I would say patience. There's like obvious things that require patience, like just waiting for your movie to get made, waiting to get the money, and like you thought it was gonna go this year. Here we are a year later and it's still not going. So patience. So I say that in that regard, but also in the sense of, like, just like working with directors and working with people and with patience also comes with like working with people and just knowing kind of when to say certain things and when to bring certain things, or it's like sometimes they're just not ready to hear certain hard truths.
How do you think as producers we should be looking at longevity? And we kind of, most of us start and think film to film, it's like paycheck to paycheck, film to film, and aren't thinking far enough ahead, aren't thinking about our own kind of individual careers. We're thinking about our directors. Are you at a place yet where you're thinking about it?
Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately is in terms of like longevity, like how do I get in a space or get how do I get myself in a position where I'm working with a producer who's doing much larger budgets than what I'm doing, and doing that intentionally so that I can learn and do that too, if that makes sense. People who I know who are writers, it's like, okay, you can be if you're a TV writer, you can be like a PA, and you can be a writer's PA, and then you can be a staff writer, and then you can be, you know what I mean? And then you're kind of working with this showrunner, and then eventually you get your own episode. There's a path. There's a path. It's like, what is that path? I mean, there's different titles of producer, which maybe I guess you could say is a path, but it's not really. I would love to have more of a system of mentorship to kind of like pull each other up, especially as women. Like, and that's the other thing too. Like, let me start it.
Go. It's fine. You can get started.
We got 10 more minutes. To get started.
Yeah, no, say it.
Just that, it's like, to have women producers who are just like, hey, I've made it, this far. Let me pull up this other filmmaker, this other producer. Let me pull you up with me,
For every one female producer, there's 41 male producers. And I saw that, and I get to a place where I feel like, why am I even trying? Why am I working so hard? I'm in a business that just doesn't want me here. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I feel it often. Yeah. And what do you do, when you feel that? But yet at the same time, you have audiences telling you, no, we want your stories as women, as people of color, but yet you're just, but you say, well, but I have an industry who doesn't want me to make those. It's very hard.
Yes, you really hit it just when you said, people say they want these stories, but yet I feel like people don't want me here. There's that, I feel like that's that hole. There's like a gaping hole right there in that people say they want these stories. I think I have some of these stories, and I'm not even naive to the fact that, like, maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's something I'm I still need to learn or what have you. But it's like that gaping hole is like, help me get there, help me get to that next phase, so that these stories that I think that I have that fill that void that you say you want, you say you want these stories. I think I have this. Well, help me make them.
What is keeping you going? What is the thing that you keep pushing, or is pushing you? Also, because as producers, we have to be the cheerleaders. We have to be the motivators. Mm-hmm. What is inspiring and motivating you?
That's a great question. I don't know. I think it sounds kind of cliche, but it is the stories, and every now and then I'll get these glimpses. It's like I get glimpses of what could be, and I get glimpses of like, oh, that's a really cool story. That's really interesting. And even within those stories, there's always something I feel is lacking. So whether it's like, oh, that was a really cool story, or that was a really cool film that I just saw. Okay, but where's the distribution for it? When is that film coming out? That is kind of what gets me going. It's like, we have to change this. You know what I mean? And like, how do we do that? And I honestly don't know how much it'll move the needle, if it'll move the needle, but I just get excited by stuff like that. I get really excited. I get excited when people, you know, since that article came out, so many people have emailed me and were like, you know, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, I want to talk to you more about it or whatever, or, you know, what are your thoughts? Like, that excites me. The fact that, that other people read this and that they learn something from that. And hopefully when they go sit at the table or they're on that phone call with that distributor, they'll know something. You know what I mean? I'm so, especially now having, you know, with Jen, having gone through that process, but even before Jen, I've always said like that's my goal is to to demystify the filmmaking process, is because there's so many things that there's like so many holes, or that, you know, in terms of what people know getting into this business and like getting into this field, there's like gaps in what people know, or like how people think this works. I need you to understand how this really works. Yeah. So this is not to discourage you, but I need you to understand how this really works. Let's be smarter. Like, let's be smarter filmmakers. This is myself included. Like, let's be smart about this.